many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. Let's just go ahead and dive right into it. This out of truthandmedia.com. BenSwan.com is now truthandmedia.com. So go check them out there. BenSwan.com will take you to truthandmedia.com for now. This one, Rand Paul launches filibuster of Patriot Act renewal. U.S. Senator and presidential candidate Rand Paul, Republican, Kentucky, began a filibuster to protest the renewal of the Patriot Act on Wednesday afternoon. Excuse me. There comes to a time in the history of nations, fear and complacency allow power to accumulate and liberty and privacy to suffer, Paul said. That time is now, and I will not let the Patriot Act, the most unpatriotic of acts, go unchallenged. Paul told New Hampshire's Union Leader newspaper in an interview last Monday of his plans to filibuster. We will be filibustering. We will be trying to stop it. We are not going to let them run over us, and we are going to demand amendments, and we're going to make sure the American people know that some of us at least are opposed to unlawful searches, he said. In 2013, Paul made headlines when he filibustered over 13 hours to protest the nomination of John O'Brien as the leader of CIA and to draw attention to the government's use of drones. I would think I'm going to cut right to the Senate floor for a, I'll probably let it go for maybe 15-20 minutes. Rand Paul is still filibustering. Steve Daines just got done talking. He took a small amount of time without Rand Paul losing the floor, so Rand Paul is still filibustering, and we'll go ahead and cut to a little bit of that and discuss what he's talking about in this filibuster.
Talk to those who are the high-ranking former heads of our security. They freely admit they get more information with a warrant. It's a little more work, but it has to be more specific. But I'm also a believer that because we've generalized what we're looking for and it's indiscriminate, that maybe we're missing people because we're overwhelmed with data and we're overwhelmed with things at the airports. You know, I would much prefer to have less of the indiscriminate searches at airports and more specific looking at the manifest of who's flying, you know, and looking and trying to find who are at risk. So I do think that there's, without question, this is not a constitutional program. It's not even legal under the Patriot Act. The courts have said it isn't, and we should do everything we can to stop it. And I appreciate your support on that. One of the things about this issue is that it really is a bipartisan issue, and an issue where there are people who feel strongly on both sides of the aisle. We had the senator from Oregon earlier and the senator from New Mexico, and I now see the senator from West Virginia, who is also a loud and consistent voice on this. Do you have a question?
Mr. President, will the senator from Kentucky yield?
The gentleman yield.
Without yielding the floor.
You know, I know that the senator, my friend from Kentucky, agrees with me that the defense of our country and the protection of our civil liberties should be bipartisan and above politics. And I know that he agrees that we can and must protect our citizens without violating their civil liberties. And again, my good friend, I don't always agree with you on every issue, but when it comes to this nation's intelligence gathering and security, we agree more than we don't. Like him, I was deeply troubled by the revelation that our country was engaged in bulk collection. I think we all were surprised. And millions of private citizens' data was gathered unknowingly and unjustifiably. In 2013, Edward Snowden revealed to the American public that the NSA was engaging in the bulk data collection and sweeping up virtually every cell phone record of an enormous number of Americans, again for no reason and no cause. The U.S. spying program did this by systematically and indiscriminately collecting millions, I mean millions of American phone records by simply taking up every phone record that came in its net, even if it wasn't remotely related to the broad general search. These are not searches that were relevant to a particular thread or an individual group. It was just a huge database documenting what millions of law-abiding citizens were doing. That is not what this country was based on. And I think you've made that very clear, sir. And I know that you believe that this was wrong, as I do. And that is not just our opinion. National security experts, legal experts, the American public, and even several courts have said that the bulk collection of data is not only unconstitutional, but also unnecessary to our national security. And to my friend from Kentucky, he has confirmed that the President's Review Group has said the bulk data collection is not essential to preventing attacks, and that program has not made a difference in a single instance. The bill that the Senate will soon be considering, the USA Freedom Act of 2015, will ensure that we restore important privacy protections for Americans. The United States will always face security threats. I think we all know that, and for generations to come. That's just a reality. On that horrible day, September 11, 2001, we as a country were reminded of this fact and realized we must meet those threats with strong law enforcement and strong intelligence. However, we must also balance that necessity with our constitutional rights. The NSA bulk data collection program clearly did not strike that balance, and the District Court of D.C. and the Court of Appeals of the Second Circuit of the United States struck it down. The courts have made clear this program is not legal, and I understand Senator Paul and Senator Wyden's frustration with any suggestion that it be continued. I believe this bill, USA Freedom 2015, moves us in a positive direction. It ends the bulk data collection program and ensures that the collection of data is related to a relevant, particular terrorist investigation. At the same time, it still protects this country. The USA Freedom Act of 2015 replaces indiscriminate bulk collection and allows the government to collect call details of records on a daily basis if it can demonstrate to the FISA court a reasonable, articulate suspicion that its search term is associated with a foreign terrorist organization. The bill provides greater transparency about surveillance activities. It contains significant new government reporting requirements for FISA authorities to ensure its activities do not again break the law. It gives private companies increased options for reporting to the public information about the number of FISA orders and national security letters that they receive. The bill requires declassification of FISA court opinions containing significant legal interpretations. The bill requires the FISA court to designate a panel to appoint individuals to advise in particular cases involving new or difficult legal issues. It expands the opportunity for the appellate review of FISA court decisions. The bill strengthens the judicial review process for gag orders. It imposes new privacy protections for FISA pen registers and limits the use of unlawfully obtained information. And the bill also contains many provisions to protect our nation's security. It creates a new emergency authority to allow the government to obtain business records, including call detail records, without advance court authorization, if an emergency requires those records. It also adds a short-term emergency authority for continued transnational surveillance of foreign terrorists or spies who come into the United States before emergency authorization can be obtained from the Attorney General. It permits ongoing FISA surveillance of an agent of foreign power who temporarily leaves the United States. It clarifies that individuals can be subject to FISA surveillance if they are knowingly aiding, abetting, or conspiring with respect to the proliferation of WMD on behalf of a foreign power. And finally, the bill increases the statutory maximum penalty for material support of terrorism from 15 to 20 years. Now, I know the senator from Kentucky does not think it goes far enough in protecting our privacy rights, but perhaps my good friend can remind us again on what provisions that you would like to see changed or strengthened in the bill to satisfy your interest and maybe Senator Wyden's interest and other people. I would yield the floor back to the senator from Kentucky to hear basically his concerns of how we can have some protections, and do we have any rights whatsoever to gather information when it's proven. I've heard you say that you thought if we could prove it, there was a definite concern that we had, you can get FISA courts and basically move forward from there. I thought this bill moved us in a positive direction. The new bill we're considering, or about to consider, sir, if you could explain to me maybe your concerns about that or what we need to do.
Let me make sure I have the question correct. Your question is on the USA Freedom, my concerns on the USA Freedom?
USA Freedom 2015.
Yeah. I want to like it, and I want to because it ends bulk collection, and I'm all for ending bulk collection. So we all agree. The people for it agree with the problem. It's a question of whether it's a solution. It says that there have to be specific selector terms on U.S. persons. Part of my problem is that persons is still defined as corporations. My concern is that you could put the word Verizon in there and the government wouldn't be collecting the records, but you still could get all the records from Verizon. You see what I mean? Because that's one of my concerns in the way it's been written. And my other general concern is that would we still be having bulk collection therefore, but it wouldn't be all done by the government, but it'd still be bulk collection through the phone companies. And I don't like the liability protection because I think it makes it more likely than not that your privacy agreement won't be as respected if they cannot be sued for violating your privacy agreement. Those are a couple of concerns. I don't know if they're insurmountable, but those are a couple concerns.
I think we both agree. I think mostly everybody in this body agrees that the bulk collections were wrong. They were proven to be illegal and should not have been done and should be stopped. I think we're all in agreement to that. We still know that we face considerable threats from around the world on a daily basis, if not even greater than that. And we were looking for trying to find the balance, and I think that you are valuable in helping us find that balance. I really do. And that's what we're looking for. And I know that your colleague, Senator, and my colleague, Senator Lee from Utah, has made a gallant effort trying to find that balance and making sure that we didn't overstep. The private companies are collecting. They already have that information anyway. It's not just sweeping from NSA as they had been doing. And basically, I'm understanding by this bill, the 2015 USA Freedom Act, where basically we'd have to demonstrate to the FISA court reasonable, articulate suspicion that its search term is associated with a foreign terrorist organization. They can't even go into those records until that's shown. That's the way I understood it. I'm not sure if there's something I'm missing.
Yeah, I guess the question I have is that we had some of those restrictions now, but they seem to think that those restrictions don't apply to collect. You know what I mean? The people interpreting what we have now are interpreting 215 to mean we can collect all the American records in bulk. If there were a way that I was necessary to pass USA Freedom, and it were that close, if people are willing to look at the bill and say, we would make a person an individual. See, the big thing for me is that a warrant should be individualized. And I'm worried that when you use the word person, if it can be replaced with the word Verizon, and we could still collect all the records, I would feel really disappointed if we thought we got rid of bulk collection, and then a year or two from now, when they finally admit it, they'll admit, oh, we're still doing the same thing. We're doing Verizon. We're getting all of Verizon's record. We're just making them process it, and we're paying them for it. That's my fear, is I want to make sure that doesn't happen.
I guess we're caught in that Citizens United decision, it sounds like.
In a different way. But, I mean, we are talking about whether or not in the intelligence selector numbers, whether or not a person is a corporation and whether or not you can have a single warrant. See, I think if you want phone records from Verizon, it would say Verizon and we want the records of John Doe. It shouldn't just say we want all the records from Verizon. That to me is a general warrant. I'm still fearful that the USA Freedom Act may not limit that.
If the Freedom Act, as it goes away, okay, the way that they've been doing bulk collection, which we agree should be done away with, and we don't come to some agreement, are you concerned that we might be in more jeopardy by not having something in place to where we're able to get the necessary intelligence we need?
And I guess that's where I also probably differ. I think we are just as safe or safer with nothing, because the Constitution allows the searching of records, and I'm all for it, but I would do it through warrants. And here's the thing is data, metadata, you can do a hop or two with these less than constitutional warrants or whatever, but with a real warrant, you can go 100 hops into the data. So I really would chase the rabbit down the hole. I mean, I really would look very hard with suspicion, and I think warrants are generally easy to get. This is a point that I don't get about why we have to have warrants that have a lower constitutional standard, because I think that the FISA warrants are almost never turned down, but neither are criminal warrants. If you were a policeman standing in front of a house, you almost never get a no, you know? But if you're a policeman and you say, I want to search all my neighbors' houses, judge is going to say no. And that's a good thing, you know? So I think traditional warrants, I think people have somehow just convinced themselves we can't catch terrorists with traditional warrants, but I think you can go through a lot of data with traditional warrants too.
Basically, that if it sunsets, the bulk collection, the way the Patriot Act has been enforced before, sunsets and it goes away, which we agree. We were trying to replace that before the sunset. You believe the system that we have in place today, I mean the system we've had in place before the Patriot Act of 2001, gives us still the ability to keep the homeland safe using the court system, as you say, follow the rabbit down the hole, using the court system. Let me say because we know we have rapid fire coming at us from different directions and people trying to come into this country and do harm. The social media has blown up since even 2001. So we're much more vulnerable from that standpoint. And what I'm hearing say also, you're not really objectionable, and if you can find the right language in that freedom, if you thought that you could get to that protection of that individual without the interpretation of the entire broadness of the corporations.
I think that also within the context of, we have 6 or 7 amendments that we'd like to introduce. Can't guarantee that we can win any of them, but there's a chance maybe we could win another reform. So, for example, one of the reforms that some people think may be as important as all of the bulk collection is the ability of the government to tell an internet provider that they have to create a backdoor to their product for the government to go through, and some of the backdoor stuff through 702. We think there are some other things that may well be as big as this. I also think that there is the ability of the government not only to use traditional warrants, they have some they're using under executive order as well as we still have, you know, a host of other types of warrants and subpoenas being used. But I would never be for this in a heartbeat if I thought it was going to make the country endangered. I think we'll be safer because of it, and so will our liberty.
The good point of the bill that we will be considering, which is the 2015 Freedom Act bill, it expands the opportunity for the appellate review of the FISA court decisions, which I think you've had a problem with too, because it has been handed out uncontested, correct?
Say that again, please.
The appellate review, the bill that we will be considering is expanding the opportunity for the appellate review of FISA court decisions, which I think and I can understand, you're saying they can get a FISA order no matter what.
I'm not sure if I understand the question, but I do believe that the court case right now, the way it stands, if the USA Freedom had passed last year, I think there's a chance it might have made the court case moot, because it would have said, oh, Congress has already acted, and Congress now has given an authority for a variation of this, and Congress already fixed the problem. So there's part of me that would like to see the appellate court case go up to the Supreme Court. It's been remanded to a lower court, so I don't know if it's ever getting there. But we ultimately have some questions in our country that won't be decided till we have a Supreme Court case. And one of those questions is, do papers have to be physical and in your house? What if they're digital and lodged somewhere else? Do you have any right of privacy, any Fourth Amendment protection at all for records that are held somewhere else? The current legal opinion doesn't really give any protection to third-party records. I think that needs to be fixed, because I think technology has made it such that our records are no longer going to be real records that you can hold in your hand. I think almost all of our records are going to be virtual and held in space somewhere, and I think you have to still have a personal privacy protection in those.
So the bill that we have proposed before us, it's going to require declassification of FISA court opinions containing significant legal interpretation, which is a positive thing.
There's a lot that I like in the bill. It's just a matter of whether or not I can be convinced that it doesn't allow bulk collection under another name. I'm still worried about that, but I'm open to it. And see, some of these things, this is a very important bill. I mean, we could have a week's discussion on this bill, and amendments, and a process. And the only reason we're getting a little bit of this is because I'm kind of forcing the issue. But I'd like to see the amendments voted on. And all the other stuff we're doing around here is important, but has no deadline. We could have done it next week, 2 weeks from now, all the stuff we're doing right now. So, but anyway, that's what I'm going to be asking for, is the ability to present 5 or 6 amendments, vote on them, and then we'll see. And I'm more than willing to talk with the authors of the USA Freedom Act to see if there's a way. But it's going to have to involve maybe some give and take to figure it out.
Well, it sounds like we're not that far apart. I think that we're all going down the same path, trying to find a way to keep the homeland as secure as humanly possible, but protecting the rights of all Americans. And I appreciate that, and I hope that we do. These are important issues. And it's a dangerous world we live in. It's a threatened world that our children are being raised in, and we want to do everything we can to protect them. I know you do too. With that, I think we all come to an agreement that what was done before was wrong. So we all come unanimously to that agreement. Finding the pathway forward is the one we're working on now. So I appreciate your sincerity and intent to try to reach out and find that. And I hope that you can find that comfort level that we can move forward and still have a protected country. Thank you.
Well, I thank the senator from West Virginia, and I think that he's made some really good points. And I think a lot of us have come to the agreement that there's a problem with bulk collection. I don't think we're yet to everybody. I think we're to a significant number, though, that agree. The court agrees with us. And so I think we are getting closer. One of the groups that we've talked about in looking at where we are on whether this is a constitutional or a legal program is that it's been pretty intriguing to look at the report that comes from the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. This is a bipartisan board, and it's a board that was put in place, and I think the appointees are bipartisan appointees. When they met, they came to the conclusion, though, that the bulk collection of records is not warranted and not given sanction by the Patriot Act. And they had 4 different reasons why they say that the telephone records program, the bulk collection of our records, does not comply even with the Patriot Act. The first reason they say is that there's no connection to any specific FBI investigation at the time of the collection. So basically, when they collect your phone records, They're not even alleging that they're related to any investigation. But that's what the statute says. They're supposed to be relevant to an investigation, but there's no evidence and nothing's even presented that there is any investigation even going on. The investigation actually starts after they've collected all of your records. So how could Section 215 say that you can collect these records because they're relevant to an investigation that has not yet even begun? They use this big data cache later on when they say that there's going to be an investigation. So I think their reason, number one, is pretty strong. That there can't be a connection or a relevancy because there really is no investigation when they collect your records. The second reasoning of the Privacy Commission was that the records are collected in bulk, potentially encompassing all telephone calling records across the nation. They cannot be regarded as relevant to any investigation without redefining the word relevant in a manner that is circular. Relevant sort of means that there's some kind of criteria that says these records have some pertinence. There's something about these records. There's something about this investigation. Like, for example, someone in the northwest section of Washington, D.C., and we saw something happen there. We're saying we want to look at the records there. Even though it might be bulk collection, it would be at least relevant to some sort of investigation. There would be some pertinent factor. But they're not electing they're just collecting everybody's records. It's completely without any relevancy. And I love the way they put it, that this would not be relevant unless we redefine the word relevant in a manner that is circular, unlimited in scope, and out of step with the case law from analogous legal contexts involving the production of records. The third reason why the Privacy Board said that this program is not legal is that it operates by putting telephone companies under an obligation to furnish new calling records on a daily basis as they are generated, instead of turning over records they already have in their possession. This is an approach lacking foundation in the statute, one that is inconsistent with FISA as a whole. The final reason they say that this program is illegal, this is the President's own Privacy Commission, is that the statute permits only the FBI to obtain items for use in investigations, did not authorize the NSA to do anything. So Section 215 of the Patriot Act is what they're saying they're using as justification. It allows the FBI to collect records. It doesn't allow the NSA at all. So they're using a statute that was intended for the FBI to say the NSA can do this. So I think the reasons are pretty clear, four succinct reasons why the Patriot Act does not justify the collection of these records. The next thing the Policy Committee looked at was and they tried to decide whether there's been any practical effect. And I know Senator Leahy was a part of this in looking at whether or not any of these things actually did catch terrorists. But this is what they conclude, and they actually looked at the classified data. So the Privacy and Civil Liberties Commission looked at the data, looked at the classified data, and this is their conclusion. We conclude that Section 215 program, the bulk collection, has shown minimal value in safeguarding the nation from terrorism. We have not identified a single instance involving a threat to the United States in which the bulk collection program made a concrete difference in the outcome of a counterterrorism investigation. Those are pretty strong words. The Policy and Civil Liberties Board, commissioned by the President, that's bipartisan, looked at the classified data and said they didn't find a single incident, not one incident, in which it made a concrete difference in the outcome of a counterterrorism investigation. Moreover, we are aware of no instance in which the program directly contributed to the discovery of a previously unknown terrorist. What does this mean? We're not like pushing a button and generating terrorists out of this. The terrorists are coming from real information. And you have to realize this misinformation and this wrong-headed information has been used forever, for 15 years, to justify the fact that we should give up on the Fourth Amendment and we should give up on protections. Over and over again, people say, if we'd only had the Patriot Act, if we'd have had the Patriot Act, we wouldn't have had 9/11. The two terrorists they claim we would have gotten were in San Diego. We already knew about them. An informant lived with them for a year. The FBI wasn't talking to the CIA, and they weren't looking at lists, and they didn't know they had come back. The CIA didn't know. Had nothing to do with having bulk collection of our records. We knew about these people. It was crummy work. It was people not doing their job. And I repeat again, no one was ever fired. We gave rewards. We gave medals of honor to everybody in the intelligence community, and no one was ever fired. There were some true heroes. The FBI agent in Arizona, the FBI agent in Minnesota, who actually discovered potential hijackers. 20th hijacker was captured a month before 9/11. That's the person who should have gotten the Medal of Honor. The person who wouldn't listen to him should have been fired. I have no understanding or awareness that anybody was ever fired over 9/11. The Policy and Civil Liberties Board goes on to say that our review suggests that Section 215 of the Patriot Act, the bulk collection of records, offers little unique value. They explore a little bit of whether or not there is a privacy problem with collecting all these records and what are the implications of collecting these records. The government's collection of a person's entire telephone calling history has a significant and detrimental effect on an individual's privacy. Beyond such individual privacy intrusions, permitting the government to routinely collect the calling records of the entire nation fundamentally shifts the balance of power between the states and its citizens, between the state and its citizens. With its power of compulsion and criminal prosecution, the government poses unique threats to privacy when it collects data on its own citizens. Compound this with the fact that the government, you could say, well, they're just collecting this data at a lower standard, but if you're not a terrorist, you don't have to worry. But here's the problem. They're collecting this data with a lower standard, a less than constitutional standard, but then they're also prosecuting you for domestic crime. Section 213 of the Patriot Act is being used 99.5% of the time for domestic crime. We're putting drug dealers in jail. That's another question and another story, but then we should vote on it as a country. Okay, for drug dealers, we're not going to have the Constitution anymore. We're going to have the Patriot Act for drug dealers. Let's be honest about it. The war on drugs has had a disparate impact, a disproportionate impact on people of color. And so you have to admit to all the young black men and all the young brown men you put in prison that we're no longer using the Constitution to stick you in prison. We're using the Patriot Act to put you in prison. We need to be honest with people. If the Patriot Act is about terrorism, they should adopt my amendment that says you can't be put in jail for a domestic crime under the Patriot Act. Why? Because the Patriot Act has dumbed down and loosened the standards. We don't have probable cause, we have relevance. And realize that relevance, as they say in the commission, has become completely circular and devoid of meaning if you're saying that all the records in the country are somehow relevant to an investigation that has not yet begun. The other point, they make a great point here about the fact that not only does this stifle or invade your privacy, it may well stifle your speech and your association. If you're going to be associated with, minority causes, unpopular causes, whether you're a kid from the North that went down to be in favor of civil rights, whether or not you're someone who belongs to the NAACP or the ACLU. They say yet, even though there's no evidence of abuse, and that's just a big argument. Everybody says, well, there's never been any abuse, so it's fine to keep doing this. They say yet, while the danger of abuse may seem remote, given historical abuse of personal information by the government during the 20th century, the risk is more than theoretical. I couldn't agree more. Moreover, the bulk collection of telephone records can be expected to have a chilling effect on the free exercise of speech and association, because individuals and groups engaged in sensitive or controversial work have less reason to trust in the confidentiality of their relationships as revealed by their calling patterns. Realize that they're taking your phone records, your calling lists, your buddy lists.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. Now, this reaches to really a deeper issue, and all these arguments are that Rand Paul's been making are legit. This really comes down to a bigger issue, and the issue is, why do governments usually clamp down on their society? When do they clamp down on their society the most? And it's usually during collapses. The more the less power that the country feels that it has in a major scope, the more it clamps down on its own citizens to try to harness the power of its citizens. And sometimes they've been successful and sometimes they haven't. In a lot of part, even the ones that you would consider not successful are successful in their own right. When you look at tyrants like in North Korea, even though they might not have been able to create this worldwide power that they really would like to see, they've gained enough power that they're never challenged. And they basically harness their citizenry as resource. And so the less and these are after empires are built. These aren't free societies, but when you realize that when you create empires, very few of them actually ever gain the scope that maybe America or Nazi Germany or even Russia and China, the world powers that are known. And I think that where we're seeing a collapse, where that's why corporations, governments, and world elitists are taking advantage and collecting all this, because basically they can get anybody for a crime. They say most Americans commit three crimes, 3 felonies or something a day, or I forget what the exact statistic was, but it basically says most Americans do this without ever realizing it. And there's real big issues with things like that. But then you also have to ask, are they going to allow this to progress, or are people like Rand Paul going to be able to slow down or stop what they're doing? A lot of people say our government's way too corrupted. There's no ending the corruption. And some people have a little more optimistic outlooks, saying that, constitutionalists might have a chance, and I really don't know. I don't harp on anybody for trying to gain more freedom, but I'm also a libertarian. I understand what government is and what it does to keep power is to gain more power. And it just seems like it's ever happening cycle throughout or not American, but world history. When you look at empires rising and falling, and how the same corruption always pops up, and manipulation and propaganda, and how very few people get to actually exercise their abilities. And we still have a amount of freedom here in America. Even though it's just corroding, we still have what we have. And not everybody does. And I always urge people to, expand on that and grow from that. I want to cover this one article, then I'm going to move on, but this one's out of the Libertarian Republic. How the media is treating Rand Paul. During the 2008-2012 elections, Ron Paul supporters often spoke of a blackout occurring where the media chose to simply not cover the successes of the Paul campaign. With the 2016 election season in full swing, it appears that Rand Paul is now receiving the same treatment. For whatever reason, there seems to be one set of rules for covering all other presidential candidates and another set for covering Rand Paul. It is almost as if the media does not want to give the impression that Senator Paul could actually win the nomination and the presidency, even though he is often polls similar to so-called frontrunners like Jeb Bush, Mark Rubio, and Scott Walker. It seems that only time that Paul is covered is when authors write to assure their readers and perhaps themselves that the junior senator from Kentucky is not viable. The National Journal wrote in February an article entitled "Why Rand Paul Can't Win the Republican Nomination," which outlined a haphazard argument about how Paul's foreign policy will doom him. Also in February, the Washington Post concluded that the mainstream media finally figure out Rand Paul's a flake, which contained mostly ad hominem attacks against Senator Paul's friends and father. It would appear that since January 2013, pundits were able to satisfy libertarians by acknowledging Paul's rise with the Republican Party. However, since the campaign has now unofficially begun, it is as if the supposed experts are now treating us as children who should not be taken seriously. There is no better example of the above phenomenon than Larry Sabato's crystal ball. In December 2014, Paul was ranked in the top tier of candidates, second only to Jeb Bush, after being inexplicably taken out of the top tier. Paul now sits behind Bush, Rubio, Walker, and even Ted Cruz. All this reporting makes little sense in light of the fact that Senator Paul has been consistently in the top tier polling both nationally and in early primary states. The most recent Quinnipiac poll from Iowa shows Paul in a tie for second place with Rubio, telling only Walker. Additionally, the newest Bloomberg poll from New Hampshire has Paul in a tie for first with Walker. One reality that pundits cannot deny is that Senator Paul matches up best with all Republicans against presumed Democrat nominee Hillary Clinton. In the NBC News Wall Street Journal poll from April, Paul trailed Clinton by only 3 points, far outperforming his Republican rivals. However, when the poll was shown on Fox News, Paul was featured at the bottom of the screen, as the candidates were in the order in which they finished in the Republican primary poll. While this could have been an honest mistake, the unspoken message seems to be one insulting that Paul is not the major candidate that the other three are. And you can read the rest of the article, the Libertarian Republic. But, you know, it's going to be that way because he's actually up there filibustering things like this, and he's speaking out about the problems with the Patriot or the Freedom Act that we kind of warned you about here on the broadcast, talking about the you know, allowing for collection still of bulk data, just in a different way. And it doesn't really address it, and you heard Rand Paul address that with the other senator. And, you know, we really, I think, are in even more of a world of hurt than we realize if Russia and China get what they want. And this kind of feeds in, you know, into the foreign policy thing. But we have world powers that are struggling for control. And I have one here out of AMTV, Christopher Green. We've been kind of, a lot of us out there have been warning that, you know, Russia and China have been working towards moving off the U.S. dollar. They've gotten European countries to sign on to this new banking system. They've got South America willing to deal with a new currency. There's been a lot of movement, and we think a lot of what happened in Ukraine is a struggle over the oil pipeline into Europe, basically by NATO. Western countries, basically, and not exactly NATO, but Western countries working in conjunction with each other. I think that we're about to see something start happening to our dollar. That's really where the major thing comes down to, is all this cheap stuff we get from China won't be cheap when they have a world currency, and now they have a majority of manufacturing. And I think Russia plays a instrumental in all of it because of the oil. I think they kind of become a strong arm with China. They're the backbone to help out in any type of circumstance. And I think there's a world shift going on. Now, will we see a complete collapse in the next 10 years, 15, 20? I don't know when it will officially happen, but it seems that everything ramps up, and we keep hearing about the economy getting really, really great, and not really seeing it. See prices going up, but not people's wages, really. And when prices go up, not people's wages, and companies are saying, you know, our market's kind of been dropping on us, where we have to keep lowering our prices. And you kind of wonder, you know, and this is in all sectors, but, you know, I've seen a lot of sectors where they're trying to compete with foreign markets, so they're dropping their prices to compete with those foreign markets, and our dollar keeps becoming worth less at the same time. therefore what you have in your pocket isn't buying as much. And supposedly the market's getting better. But this might explain where we could be headed. Again, the yen to replace dollars world reserve currency, AMTV Christopher Green.
Everybody, I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning into AMTV Alternative Media Television. It is May 18th, 2015. Very interesting day, very interesting weekend. And I've been doing a lot of research the past few days. A couple things I wanted to share with you guys. It is becoming more and more apparent that the US dollar is being replaced by a new reserve currency. And of course, I've been talking about this since the channel started about 5 years ago. And I've done countless videos on this topic, amounting in 2,000 plus videos thus far. The US dollar is losing its status and has arguably already lost its status as the world reserve currency. What do I mean by this? And what is happening now to show us evidence in real time, in reality, that this is actually taking place? Well, of course, we've had this massive stimulus since 2008 and 2009, this massive redistribution of wealth, propelled and propped up by 0% interest rates, leverage, easy credit, courtesy of the Federal Reserve, printing currency from nothing, backed by nothing. Again, really just essentially a faith-based system that the general public is totally and utterly uneducated about. We've had the establishment and the operation of Western-backed organizations like the IMF and the World Bank for years now, which basically issue debt to countries throughout the world and put a stranglehold on countries like Ukraine, for example. There's a reason why that's a geopolitical chess piece, having lent some, I believe it was $16 billion or something in that ballpark to Ukraine not too long ago, only so it could, again, put that stranglehold and albatross of debt around the country so the U.S., Western nations that control the IMF and World Bank can implicitly, indirectly control the country, which of course is a chess piece with Russia and this second Cold War that we've been talking about and people have been talking about for several years now. In addition to that, we've had the establishment of a counterpoint, a direct competitor to the World Bank and IMF. Very recently, this is something that has just happened, and I've spoken about this in detail, with the establishment of the AIIB, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or the competitor, or what is becoming the direct competitor to Western-controlled debt. Again, the IMF, a system created by and for the West, with member nations, and a basket of currencies that they call and is known as an SDR, or a special drawing rights. Now, that basket of currency includes 4 major currencies at this given point of the time. The US dollar, making up about a 41% weight. The euro, making up a 37% weight. The pound sterling, making up an 11% weight. The yen, making up a 9% weight. And now what they're talking about, courtesy of Bloomberg, and this has been something I've been talking about for years now. I said it was a question not if it would happen, but when. And it seems that Christine Lagarde, now the head of the IMF, also agrees, and she replaced Dominique Strauss-Kahn, which was just, again, a chess move to push him out and use a scandal to push him out, to put Christine Lagarde into power during this financial crisis. There was a political reason behind this, and largely we could argue a conspiracy. I read an article today that was posted May 14th, a few days ago, that says that China's yuan, otherwise known their currency as the renminbi, may draw $1 trillion on getting IMF reserve status. Followed up by an article today that says that the German central bank, the Bundesbank, their bond equivalent, and their equivalent central bank, says they see the IMF decision as key to yuan as reserve currency. So basically the IMF in response to this new competitor that makes up the AIIB, and China, the yuan, the renminbi, to supersede in the not too distant future the US dollar as the world reserve currency, which will have extreme repercussions in regards to the flow of international financial assets. Every 5 years, they basically do an analysis and evaluate whether or not they're going to change the distribution, the weights, the percentage weights, and or potentially add or get rid of one of the currencies in the basket that makes up the special drawing rights, or the SDR. These articles are telling us that the yuan, also known as the renminbi, it's equivalent to the sterling, to the pound being a unit and the sterling being the currency, just like the yuan is the unit of the renminbi. If you didn't know, will be adding likely the yuan when they finish their decision-making process at the end of 2015. They do this every 5 years, adding the yuan as a member of that basket of the SDR, essentially internationalizing the renminbi as a reserve currency, or as one of the reserve currencies they said could potentially have a weight, and I would argue will more than likely be much greater in the near term, of around 13, 14%. Now, what's interesting is that the whole concept of an SDR, special drawing rights, basically formed post-Bretton Woods and kind of the collapse of that system. It used to be in the 1970s when an SDR was first created out of thin air, it was backed by gold. It was backed by bullion. And in addition to that, one SDR equaled one US dollar. It was a direct one-to-one relationship. Since that time, it's been depegged, if you want to call that. It's been removed from its backing of gold, and essentially, just like the dollar had been taken off the gold standard, is backed by nothing, created out of thin air, and is just really this baseless, faith-based system. What's interesting about it, and I pulled some statistics, is that it used to have this one-to-one relationship with the US dollar to the SDR. Since that time, the US dollar has collapsed in its relation to the SDR, now worth about 70 cents compared to what it used to be worth. So essentially a 30% collapse from that one-to-one relationship. So a lot has changed with this system, and we're moving a direction where the AIIB, Asia, and the rising East is threatening this balance of power. And you see the yuan, I would argue, has already been internationalized as the new reserve currency. It's why the IMF and the World Bank was hesitant to add the yuan, the renminbi, to this basket before, but now is being forced to succumb to the reality that the US and the dollar specifically, which holds the heaviest weighting and really majority role in this basket, that era is coming to an end. When people wake up to this and they fully understand and realize that this revaluation is taking place, there will be a drastic revaluation of international financial assets. We're seeing some of this now, but there will be dramatic moves in currencies around the world. There will be dramatic moves in fixed income in the bond market, which we're seeing today. There will be dramatic moves in equities. There will be dramatic moves in general that I would argue we're already seeing. We're seeing huge moves in all types of markets and financial assets today. The article that I cited in Bloomberg, which I'll post a link to, said that there could be up to $1 trillion in reallocation to the yuan as this internationalized currency upon its placement and potential placement into the SDR basket. What's also interesting about this is the SDR, or an SDR, again, this thing that was created out of thin air by the IMF, is not a currency or claim on the IMF, according to the IMF's website, but a potential claim on the freely usable currencies of IMF members, which have been allocated, each country or member allocated SDRs from and backed by nothing, created literally out of thin air, and just allocated certain SDR units of which they can lend and borrow SDRs on an ongoing basis. So what we have coming to the United States of America, those of you tuning in Europe or Australia or Canada or Asia, is a global reallocation of wealth. An internationalization of the yuan, the renminbi, as the new world reserve currency, and the loss of the dollar and this old system that the West has enjoyed for many, many years now. And really a shift in economic power going forward. A massive reallocation of wealth and a massive reallocation of assets. Now, all of this is moving into some kind of form of a new basket of currencies, some kind of new internationalized currency that many have suspected will revolve around what honestly at first look is a very complicated system, that being the system set up by the IMF, the SDR, special drawing rights, and this basket of currencies. But when you really look at it, isn't that complicated. It's just a financial instrument created out of nothing, allocated from nothing, and backed by nothing, even though it originally was backed and linked to gold, just like the US dollar was, and originally had a one-to-one relationship with the dollar, but has since lost roughly 30% of its value since the 1970s. Even the IMF website itself, and I'll post all these links in the description box below, defines an SDR, a special drawing rights, as a costless, unconditional reserve asset. A costless, unconditional reserve asset, which also has a function of an interest rate that I believe is based on a weighted average of short-term debt instruments of these member nations that is essentially at zero. If I remember correctly, I think it was like 0.005. So essentially at zero. So again, all this boils down to is easy money, leverage, super leverage, and an aggressive reallocation of assets that most of Americans and most people around the world have no idea is taking place. So today it is part two, the continued version of yesterday's episode. It is now Tuesday, the 19th, hence I'm wearing a new shirt and my hair is probably done a little bit differently. From time to time I like to think and sleep on some of these thoughts. So what happens next? What happens when international investors, more importantly the retail investor, the smart money's already out, what happens when the little guy realizes that there is this massive redistribution of financial assets taking place? What happens when investors begin selling in droves? And I think we're already seeing this. This is happening now. Again, the smart money is already doing this. Begin selling U.S. denominated dollar-based assets. And it starts moving into, let's say, the Chinese renminbi, the yuan. Now, it's kind of like water, a current of water, selling U.S. dollar-denominated assets and buying, let's say, Chinese-denominated assets. What happens? What happens when all the liquidity that's being currently fed into the market coming from the Federal Reserve, these stimulus packages, quantitative easing to infinity, and these bailouts ends? What happens when the little guy realizes that we have another liquidity crisis and the dollar, let's say, experiences a shock of 20%, for example, when we wake up tomorrow morning, and all of a sudden 20% of their real wealth has been lost. Similarly to what we saw with the Swiss franc, although it moved in the opposite direction when it depegged itself from the euro. And basically these Western shenanigans that have made up QE in the States and the European Union at the ECB. What happens? You know, folks, you can call it a dollar collapse. You can call it an economic crisis. You can call it a systemic shock. But it's happening. It's no longer conspiracy theory, but it's reality. As Christine Lagarde at the IMF, the head of the IMF, now suddenly agrees to me, even though people called it a conspiracy theory several years ago, are now telling us that the Chinese renminbi will be internationalized as a reserve currency, becoming a part of the basket that makes up the special drawing rights, the SDR. And you see, whether or not it is the SDR basket of currencies that becomes the new world reserve currency, or it's an equivalent or competitor basket of currencies at the AIIB, doesn't matter. This is happening with or without the United States. Whether or not the United States and Western interests like it or not. Whether or not the IMF or World Bank like it or not. There's going to be economic chaos. There's going to be war. And there's obvious pitfalls that are currently present. You know, it's not all doom and gloom. There is opportunity in this. You know, during the Great Depression, those that were smart, that were liquid, that weren't over leveraged, weren't margined, were able to buy assets on the cheap during the height of the Depression, during the collapse. They were able to buy assets. They were able to buy land. They were able to buy businesses. They were able to buy stocks and bonds on the cheap. And what we're living through now is almost a repeat of that. As Mark Twain would say, it's not repeating exactly, but it's rhyming. We're seeing a new bubble. We're seeing a triple in the S&P 500, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, since the intraday trough on the S&P of 666, a triple into new bubblicious territory. In fact, yesterday, I believe it was, Bank of America Merrill Lynch said we're living in the twilight zone. That's how they describe the stock market. The twilight zone. Do 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 do. This is what is happening. There is a gigantic transfer of wealth that I would argue has already taken place. We saw this in 2008, 2009. Isn't it convenient that the largest transfer of wealth in the history of the world that everybody knew was coming, that was being transferred from the baby boomers, suddenly was siphoned off and funneled to the top 0.001% bankster elite, by the way, which none of these people have gone to jail. And now people like Jamie Dimon, the head of these monolithic institutions, JP Morgan Chase is a specific example, warning us of a liquidity crisis to come. Other independent analysts, people like Mohammed El-Arian of Allianz Investments, formerly PIMCO, warning us of a liquidity shock in the not too distant future. You see that, folks, the time to prepare is now. I mean, you're better off preparing 6 months prior to a crisis, an economic shock, or a systemic event than you are waiting around and trying to react and being reactive at the height of a crisis, like what we saw in 08 and 09. Again, we had the warning signs. We had the collapse of Bear Stearns. We had the collapse of Lehman Brothers. And most people said, oh, you know, it's going to be fine. It'll work itself out. The more you study this, the deeper you uncover what's really happening, the more profound this actually is. That's why I slept on it last night. The more shocking it actually is, the deeper the rabbit hole actually goes. This is heavy. Again, folks, it's going to lead, we're already seeing now, we're seeing economic warfare. It will lead to physical war.
AMTV, Christopher Green. Go check him out on YouTube. You know, it's one of those things that it doesn't even have to lead to physical war with other countries. It can lead to physical war within the country to basically destabilize it. And we kind of already see that. And we see this divide and conquer, and we also see this collection of data. And what is it? It's almost like it's cataloging you as wealth and your viability in their society that they're going to create? Will you be a hindrance to their vision of the future because you won't step in line? It seems to be what this is, and a intentional divide and conquer to direct your attention towards the wrong people. And then you understand the financial stability where you have a lot of companies downsizing. And even though that's good for the company, that doesn't show a prosperous economy. And that's where the Wall Street gets completely off kilter with what the economy's doing. Yes, that company might have made a successful business decision by downgrading, but that means they're also producing less. They're also hiring less. And that's not a good economy. More people that are able to work in, working for someone is not always the thing. If you can be entrepreneurs and create your own ideas and ventures, you become your own boss, and it's another challenge, that you will have to deal with. But the economy, when you look at, are people doing well? Well, some people are, definitely the ultra rich. But in reality, the mass majority of people do not see a blooming economy. And you can also see it when you see the amounts of money that the wealthy people are making. I mentioned this before. It was something during one of Bernie Sanders' questionings of Walmart welfare, brought up that when General Motors was the biggest corporation in America, in today's dollars, they would have been making around $38 on average per employee. And nowadays, Walmart being the biggest corporation in America, you're talking in today's terms, around, I think it was $8 or $9 an hour. So, and they get subsidies. So, our system is basically siphoning the rest of the wealth off of the people and transferring it because they know that there is a dollar collapse. And it's real evident. And you also look at the same time periods, 10 cents, a dime that was made of silver, when they still made dimes out of silver, could get you a gallon of gas. Well, that same amount of silver can get you a gallon of gas today. A U.S. dime cannot. So not only do you make less, as the comparison between General Motors and Walmart, the less money that you've just made is worth less. And we've been so complacent, I think, in thinking that we're living these great lives when you look at really what others are doing. And, there's some blame to place upon ourselves when we don't take the initiative to do things, to become creative, to be entrepreneurs, to break out of just being another person in line working. We do have to take that upon ourselves, and we do recognize the crony capitalism or the corporatism that exists in America that definitely does put a lot of roadblocks in the way of people doing this. There are still ways that you can get out there and at least put yourself in a little bit better position to be ready for things. And, every step that you take right now is very, very important. So prepping is one of the things. It's one of those always be prepared type deals. It does not hurt to be prepared. And, in a circumstance of natural disaster or some type of war or anything, financial collapse, whatever may pop up, you at least have some measures to try to put yourself in a better position. And that's important to do. Now, one thing that has a lot of people pretty worked up is this jade helm. And then all the militarization going on and everything, happening. Definitely has people kind of riled up. Adam Kokesh put out one, the real threat of Jade Helm 15, how close is martial law? And I'm going to cue that up here.
Hey everybody, this is Adam Kokesh here in beautiful Waco, Texas on the American Campfire Freedom Tour. And we've been getting a lot of questions by email, on social media, in person even here about the upcoming Jade Helm. And this is getting mainstream media attention. It's a mainstream story. It's not some, crazy conspiracy. It's a real thing to look at. It's a real phenomenon. And it is worth paying attention to, at least acknowledging, even though I haven't done anything on this yet, because it really isn't that important. More than anything, it's a distraction from what we need to do to create a free society. And as much as I'm concerned about what they're doing, I'm really much more concerned about what they're thinking and the thinking of the American people that makes something like this possible. Because events like this have happened before. There have been training events in American cities. Even here in Waco, just yesterday, they have the SWAT team training at a school doing, mock bomb defusings and explosions. And it's like, conditioning people for martial law, and it's about to come. And this is the problem with something like this, is that even if you're paying attention, if you're reacting in fear, you're still being enslaved by the system. You're allowing your emotional outlook, your attitude to be determined by what they're doing. And they want you to see this. They're not doing it in secret, okay? This is out in the open. Walmarts are closing, they want you to know. So there's two reactions that they want you to have to this. And there are lots of ways that you can look at it, lots of things that you can do, but either they want you to think that this is the government keeping you safe, or to be afraid of government. Either way, they win, you lose. Now, there's a very powerful illusion about government keeping us safe. And it's true that governments protect their citizens, but only in the same way that a rancher protects his cattle. So if that's the case, for those people, the response to Jade Helm should be, hey, by the way, you're still 8 times more likely, or according to The Guardian, 50 times more likely to be killed by a cop than by a terrorist. And it's worth taking advantage of this opportunity to reach out to people like that. If there are people in your family who are going, yeah, no, I'm glad Jade Helm is happening. I'm glad our military is training strong. And then there are the people who are afraid. And if you're one of them, and in a way, you know, that's kind of a rational response to seeing government flex its muscle like this, then don't be afraid. Take that fear, take that anger, take that motivation, and channel it to something good. And I'll tell you why. It's the thinking, not just of the American people, but of law enforcement and the military that's so important in this. Because a lot of people think that, you know, we're going to have martial law come to the United States. Although I would say we're already there. It's a matter of degrees. We have a lot of martial law in the United States, right? So I look at the history of warfare as a military combat veteran myself to know that you can't get away, the governments of the world can't get away with what they used to be able to get away with. Think about this. What was the last time they were able to convince millions of gullible young men to meet in the middle of a field and just kill each other because they're wearing different colors? You can't get away with that anymore. And as a participant in the global war on terror, as horrific as all of it has been, it's still heartening to look back historically and see this is the most they can get away with these days. And the reason is because of communications technology, the internet, cell phones, connectedness, just people being able to see each other and understand what they're doing on the other side of the planet. In order for governments to get away with what they get away with, they need an enforcement class, cops and soldiers, willing to violate the rights of their subjects. And that happens in America because the American people give their sons and daughters to this system. They tell people that being a cop is a noble thing. They encourage this kind of destructive behavior. And that's what we're really up against. Now, if you look at Jade Helm and you're very afraid, you know, I'm not going to sit here and just try to, you know, manage your emotions for you. But if you take that as motivation, take it as motivation to share some freedom with the enforcement class. Maybe it's a cop that you know, or that you're friends with, or a soldier in your family, or a Marine, you know, whoever it is, they're the ones who need to hear this message the most. And one of the reasons that we wrote Freedom, the book, the way that we did, that we're on a national tour promoting, giving away for free. By the way, our updated tour schedule is on the website at thefreedomline.com. Please check that out. Coming to a city near you. The book is free at all of our events. We hope to see you out there on the road. But the reason is, it's a tool. We want you to take this tool and use it. What is going to prevent something like Jade Helm or the last time they were training, wherever it was in the United States, you want to prevent that from turning into martial law? Increase the understanding of freedom of all Americans, of all people in the world, but especially the enforcement class. Now, a lot of us seem to make the mistake of wanting to just isolate bad people from our lives. And in a sense, that's very important from who you interact with and in your personal life. But in the bigger picture, you can't just ignore police because they're freedom disrespecters. If anything, they're the ones who are most important to reach out to. They're the ones who are most important to get this message. So please take this as an opportunity. Remember, this is National Police Week, so show your appreciation for police as human beings rather than cogs in the machine, as enforcers of law, as the enforcers of the superclass, and peace the police. Don't flip them off. There's no need to increase the aggression. What you resist persists, but if you can reach out and tell a cop, I love you and I wish you'd quit your job and do something that is actually in service of the people, I would love that. this is the opportunity. So really, Jade Helm, as scary as it may be, as frightening as this specter of martial law may be, it's far more important to take this as a reminder. Let this be a reminder. Let the state give you the reminder that we need to do the unglamorous but far more satisfying work in order to end the state for good, which is to wake people up to the message of freedom. So if you haven't yet, please read Freedom. Check out thefreedomline.com and keep spreading the message. Live free, be happy, and enjoy life.
Okay, Adam Kokesh on YouTube, thefreedomline.com. You know, when it comes to this, a lot of people still believe that we're too far past that, but I think there is something that it's been shown to us enough times is that there is still humanity out there. You still see someone willing to help another person out. And if we can expand upon that, and it comes back to, you know, paying it forward type deals where every little interaction you have, try to have the best interaction. Not always possible, but in a lot of circumstances it is. And I think if we work on that more, and when we have those interactions, we use that type of method more, I think we could have more positive interactions. Okay. Now, if we're going to have this martial law, with the bulk collection of data, and you know that they have supercomputers. Do you think it would be possible to round up dissenters, Americans, that I don't know. A lot of people go, well, you know, if they work with NATO, they probably could. And I think there's a slight possibility, but I think that all they would end up doing is splitting and destabilizing America. They would create some type of civil war. I think that's a conclusion that is possible, but I can see it from the other point too. There was a report out of Next News Network, though, that says there's a shock video of children used in FEMA camp roundup drills. And it's a 2-minute clip here that I'll cue up.
Gary Franchi reporting for the Next News Network. This footage is probably the most shocking documentation of FEMA camp roundup training to date. Children used alongside actors in a bloody confrontation on American soil. These are the U.S. Marines from the 1st Battalion, 5th Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division, practicing, quote, assault support tactics in Yuma, Arizona, as part of a 7-week exercise prior to the Jade Helm 15 exercises. Shot by the Department of Defense by Sergeant Daniel D. Ujampa, this compounds the amount of official footage being released by the Department of Defense documenting their martial law training for the public to see and accept. As Henry Kissinger says, military men are just dumb, stupid animals to be used as pawns. These troops are just following orders at the behest of the elite, who are preparing for the Great Collapse. It's our responsibility to inform these soldiers to question and refuse these unconstitutional orders before Armageddon Protocol is officially initiated. Again, the question is raised, who is truly the intended targets of the roundups? Islamic insurgents overseas, American constitutionalists at home, a rioting and starving public? We can only speculate at this point, but one thing is for sure, you will never see this on the corporate mafia media. If you did, they would either be cheering on these drills or marginalizing us for our independent reporting of them. The only way to stop these activities is to inform the public. Please help us wake up America and these soldiers by sharing this report. For the Next News Network, I'm Gary Franchi.
You know, I would hope that there's enough good people out there that this wouldn't be able to happen. But we know it can happen, and history has proven that. Okay. Got about a half hour left, so I'm going to move on here to some recent news. Maybe. Okay. This one out of truthvoice.com, federal appeals court to police officer, no, you can't slap cuffs on peaceful gun owners. Every part of Sean Northrup's midsummer evening walk with his wife, daughter, grandson, and dog was illegal, including the holstered handgun he openly carried on his hip. But that was not enough to keep Northrup from being disarmed, handcuffed, and threatened with arrest by a police officer. Fortunately, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals refused to let the officer who illegally detained Northrup escape accountability, exemplifying the kind of judicial engagement that is needed to protect law-abiding citizens from unreasonable searches and seizures. Northrup, a resident of Toledo, Ohio, was enjoying a peaceful walk with his family when a passing motorcyclist, Alan Rose, caught sight of his firearm and yelled that Northrup could not walk around with that gun like that. Northrup's wife, Dennis, informed Rose correctly that it is perfectly legal to open carry firearms in Ohio. Rose, nothing less, called 911, stated that he had observed a man carrying his gun in the open. The dispatcher also told Rose that it is legal to openly carry firearms in Ohio, but apparently a bit uncertain directed Officer David Bright of the Toledo Police Department to the scene, relating to Bright that Northrup was walking his dog carrying a handgun out in the open. When Bright encountered Northrup, Northrup was still walking his dog, his gun secure in its holster. What happened after Bright stepped out of his vehicle and approached Northrup is disputed. According to Northrup, Bright announced that he would shoot Northrup if he went for his weapon, refused to answer questions about what was going on or whether Northrup was free to leave, and threatened to arrest Northrup for inducing a panic. Ultimately, Bright disarmed Northrup, placed him in handcuffs, and put him in a squad car, where he remained for half an hour. Upon discovering that Northrup had a concealed carry permit, which, in point of fact, he did not need in order to openly carry his gun, Bright released Northrup with a citation for failure to disclose personal information. The charges were later dropped. Northrup sued Bright and other members of Toledo Police Department in federal court, alleging violations of his rights under First, Second, and Fourth Amendments, as well as state law. The district court rejected Northrup's First and Second Amendment claims, but held that his Fourth Amendment and state law claims against Bright could go to trial, Bright then appealed to the Sixth Circuit, asserting qualified immunity from suit. Qualified immunity protects police officers from being held personally liable for violating rights unless those rights are clearly established in practice. The judge-made doctrine all too often insulates police misconduct from both liability and meaningful judicial scrutiny. It has long been established that the Fourth Amendment prohibits officers from coercively stopping and frisking people without reasonable suspicion that they are committing a crime or are about to commit a crime. In the case of Terry versus Ohio, 1968, the Supreme Court defined reasonable suspicion, explained that officers must be able to point to specific observable facts and evidence indicating that a person is armed and dangerous, and inarticulate hunch or intuition will not suffice, nor is it enough for officers to suspect that a person is armed, as the 10th Circuit would later put it, to hold that the presence of a gun is sufficient to justify a frisk would be to effectively eliminate Fourth Amendment protections for lawfully armed persons. In a carefully reasoned opinion, Judge Jeffrey Sutton determined that if Northrup's account of the events was accurate, whatever suspicions Bright may have harbored that Northrop was committing a crime or was about to do so were not reasonable. The specific facts that Bright relied upon is stopping, disarming, and detaining Northrop consisted entirely in Northrop's open possession of a firearm and a 911 call that informed Bright that Northrop was openly carrying a firearm. Neither of these facts suggest that Northrop was breaking the law or was dangerous. As Judge Sutton pointedly observed, while the dispatcher and 911 caller may not have known the details of the Ohio's open carry firearm law, the police officer had no basis for such uncertainty. While Bright argued that he faced a difficult decision, respond to the community's fear and the appearance of the gunman, or do nothing and hope that he was not about to start shooting, Sutton rejected this as a false choice, absent any actual evidence that Bright was about to start shooting. Sutton reasoned Bright's hope remains another word for the trust that Ohioans have placed in their state's approach to gun licensure and gun possession. No law-abiding American out for a walk with his family and his dog should end up in the back of a police car. An officer responsible for putting him there should be able to escape responsibility for his misconduct. Judge Sutton's decision provides a blueprint for ensuring that those enforce the law are not beyond its reach. As for Bright, a jury of Ohioans will determine whether he betrayed their trust. Okay, and again, that was out of truthvoice.com, and it's good to see that, well, they actually made a pretty decent decision for once, which the court tends to, but it's usually overturned and then overturned again, and it just, we don't ever seem to get a real conclusion on it. And a lot of it too, it seems that we have a censoring. You know, when we have like the internet, you know, whether it be SOPA or CISPA, whatever pops up, you'll hear about it. They won't pass it, then they try to pop something else up. And each time they do this, it seems that it gets reported on less, and I never know if it's you know, the web censoring things like this, or if it's just not being reported on as much at times. But apparently, this one from We Are Change says Google censors Hillary Clinton controversy, and we know that we have seen censorship come against Ron Paul supporters, and we seen that during the '08 and the '12 elections, and you start to see who people favor, and you know, we have these companies come out saying we don't want government, you know, having access to things like this and blah blah blah. At the same time, you find out that they tend to support a lot of the big government candidates, and it's the two-faced approach, and it's to basically keep control of their empires. They're corporate empires, and if they have enough power and don't give government too much power, government won't take their power away. It has nothing to do with you. But let's go ahead and play this. It's a pretty short clip, but yep.
And I need to make a very important video about the latest censorship by Google when it comes to any criticism of Hillary Rodham Clinton. Now, I made 2 videos about Hillary Clinton, one about the real George Stephanopoulos Clinton donation scandal, where I broke down how the mainstream media is being controlled and working in hand-in-hand with the Clinton Global Initiative and the Clintons. And I made another one that's going viral right now, that's on the front page of the Drudge Report, called Hillary Clinton Supporters Actually Don't Support Hillary. When I checked my video manager on YouTube, both of these videos, without explanation, without any recourse, without even a notification, have been demonetized. I cannot make money off these videos. As a content producer, as an independent journalist on YouTube, I make the majority of my funds to keep this operation going through YouTube advertisements. What Google and AdSense and YouTube are doing right now, they're saying, if you criticize Hillary Clinton, we will make sure your operation cannot continue. We will make sure to hurt you financially and that you will not be able to do your job. Now, it's very important to note both of these videos have no foul language, no copyright claims, no violation of any terms and services. It is all original content, and yet YouTube, again, no notification, no way to even address this problem. Nothing, just took off the monetization as this video is going viral, which helps me again run this entire operation. Now, why is this happening? They also demonetized the video where I confronted Hillary Clinton one-on-one, face-to-face, man to demon. They also demonetized that video, so I also can't survive off that one. So it's not just the latest Hillary Clinton videos that I've been releasing. But why is this happening? As we know, Hillary Clinton just hired a Google executive to be her chief technology officer for her 2016 presidential election. We also know the very fact that the director of Google Ideas, Jared Cohen, used to be a Clinton advisor, and many people like Julian Assange are also predicting Google will support Hillary Clinton in the 2016 presidential elections. Now, obviously, Google is interlinked with Hillary Clinton in many different ways. Obviously, the videos that are being demonetized are being ones about Hillary Clinton, criticizing the real person she is, going after the real truth that the mainstream media will not cover. And as we know, the mainstream media is in bed with Hillary Clinton, with the Clinton Global Initiative. Many members from CNN, New York Times, the Washington, all these major media organizations are in bed with the Clinton Global Initiative, the Bill Clintons. Now, obviously, I'm getting the message here. Do not criticize Hillary Clinton. So what am I going to do? I'm going to believe in free speech. I'm going to fight for what's right. And let's go over some of the latest Hillary Clinton scandals. Now, as we know, one of the biggest one has been her emails. It just came out through a Freedom of Information Act that Hillary Clinton's emails will be released on January 2016. Now, of course, the mainstream media is talking right now about, oh my God, Hillary Clinton actually talked to reporters. Oh my God, Hillary Clinton wants these emails released, but they're not giving you the full story, so you're going to go get it here, of course. Now, of course, Clinton decided to keep her emails on a private server so she could not be held accountable with Freedom of Information Act requests, so people could not know what she was doing, so she could keep things in secret, so there was no transparency, there was no oversight, and she could do whatever she wanted illegally and secretly and not be held accountable for her illegal actions. And as we know, her hosting was hosted by a company that was hacked in 2010 and had data redirected to Ukraine, and an IP address revealed linked to the British Virgin Islands. So even her private server, her private email domain host that she used to hide all her dirt, has been hacked into in 2010, which also, again, puts in danger a lot of people in government, which shows you how idiotic this decision was by Hillary Rodham Clinton. Now, of course, the Hillary Clinton campaign staff is answering back, saying, no, Hillary Clinton, she only used one email. She hates carrying around two phones. No. This is their justification. But as we know through these new emails, that there was more than just one email when she was Secretary of State. Even in this video, as you see this hard-hitting journalist ask this very important question.
Ask the big question. Okay. iPhone or Android?
iPhone. Okay, in full disclosure,
BlackBerry.
and a BlackBerry.
She admitted herself she had two phones, and the major defense that the Hillary Clinton campaign is using with her using this private email service is that she didn't want to carry around two phones. So that's why we only put it on one and we had to do it through a private one. It's all lies. It's all malarkey, and they're lying through their face. There's two emails. She also deleted 30,000 emails that no one will ever see about her illegal activities as Secretary of State. Now let's go on. Of course, second email. No accountability, no transparency. She's obviously hiding something. What could she be hiding? Let's go over some of the very important facts. There's a new Defense State Department document that revealed that the Obama administration, as Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, knew that Al-Qaeda, a terrorist, had planned the Benghazi attacks in Libya 10 days beforehand. We know also that the U.S. was running guns through Libya, through Benghazi, to Syria. If you don't know this, Hillary Clinton was the major proponent of bombing Libya. And by bombing Libya with NATO, we also reinforced people who were against the dictator there, Gaddafi. A lot of people that we armed and gave money to were also Al-Qaeda. And then through the Benghazi U.S. Embassy, there was weapons shipped to Syria after Gaddafi was overthrown to get rid of Assad. And that's where we have been supporting not only Al-Qaeda, but ISIS. And that's the news that you will not hear anywhere else. Now, as we know, Hillary Clinton also wants to pretty much hide the fact that she's getting bought off by not only foreign governments, but also corporations. Governments like Saudi Arabia that actually beheaded more people than ISIS this year, that has gross violations of human rights, but yet is not mentioned in the American mainstream media once. And she receives $500,000 worth of jewelry from Saudi Arabia. Nothing is free in this country, in this world. And obviously, she's being bribed. She's also being bribed, and she's pushing a GMO agenda because she's hiring Monsanto lobbyists while pushing for GMOs, genetically modified food. If we just look over some of the latest scandal, Hillary Clinton's foundation hid 2.35 million foreign donations from the head of the Russian government uranium company that had business before Hillary Clinton's State Department. It's a clear violation of the Memorandum of Understanding with the Obama administration. She was using the State Department as a personal way to receive funds and cash and money. And now she's using that money to hire PR coaches to make her more likable to the general public. She has bought off the mainstream media. She's bought off Google, and now everything is happening. Bill Clinton bagged $500,000 from a speech in Moscow, paid for by a Kremlin-linked bank. Hillary Clinton's brother sits on the board of a mining company that scored an extremely rare gold exploitation permit in Haiti as Hillary and Bill Clinton dispersed billions of U.S. taxpayers' dollars in Haiti. Hillary Clinton's foundation hid a foreign donation of $2 million of a stock by a mining executive with business before Hillary Clinton became Secretary of State. Another clear violation of her terms and services of the office. Hillary Clinton also approved of Russia's takeover of uranium and transferred 20% of all U.S. uranium to the Russian government. Bill Clinton was paid for by a for-profit education company, Larchard White. That company benefited from an increase in funding from Hillary Clinton's State Department. Of course, as you see, this list goes on and on, not only of double dipping, but just pure out corruption. And if it couldn't get any crazier, Gawker has just released files putting Bill Clinton with a pedophile billionaire on his private jet. And they actually have the records to show Bill Clinton being with this billionaire pedophile that settled 30 times out of court with supposed John Does, underage girls who were aging from the range of 12 years old that were sexually abused by this man. And of course, he's a billionaire. He's settling out of court, throwing money at these people. And of course, one of his friends is Bill Clinton. I'm going to make a full video about this soon. But again, the message is clear. Do not talk about Hillary Clinton. Listen, whatever they're trying to do, whatever message they're trying to send, we have to make sure that this does not work in any way, shape, or form. And we have to stand up to any form of censorship, any form of just trying to make you afraid to speak out against Hillary Clinton. This will not work. That's why I'm asking you to share this video. Give this video to all your friends who are thinking about voting for Hillary Clinton. Check out all of our other Hillary Clinton videos. There's a lot. All of them have been demonetized, and they're sending me a clear message. You will not survive if you keep talking about Hillary Clinton. But with every problem, there is a solution, there's an answer. On wearechange.org, we have a sponsor lounge where for $5 a month, we will not only give you behind-the-scenes content, we will give you all of our trips, all of our tips, tricks, and techniques. We will tell you what we are doing. We will also just give you all the footage and all the behind-the-scenes videos that you will not get anywhere else just by becoming a We Are Change sponsor. And you will help keep this independent media organization truly free without any corporate sponsors, without any government control, by just donating $5 a month and supporting this operation. I'm still keeping Change Media University at $100. I have a full online college. It's free for high school students, but it's $100. I lowered the price. If you're interested in learning journalism, check out wearechange.org and click on Change Media University. We have a full online college course that you could take that will teach you everything from A to Z, how to be an independent journalist and how to do what I do and get up in Hillary Clinton's face and ask her about the real truth of what she did in Libya by supporting Al-Qaeda. And then I asked her this. I asked her this very important question that's now coming out months ago. I asked her this about a year ago. You could do this too. Anybody can. We will not be censored. We will not be shut down. Screw the ISIS terrorist funding, corporate sellout, GMO queen, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
And we have so many issues with Hillary, but it's one of those things. It's an obvious elitist. You know, everything that surrounds her is suspect at the least, if not obviously criminal. And to have her have a private email, to have her delete things, basically destroying evidence, would get any of us probably put behind bars. She's running for president. And it just amazes me that you would have anybody behind her. And these are the things that we're kind of fighting against. And what we need to make sure is that all future generations are aware of things, not easily brainwashed. And we see so many people that when we do see the hardcore Hillary supporters, they're not really knowledgeable. They're just, they're stuck in that bandwagon type deal, and they're really unaware of reality. They just really have no awareness of reality. I think that Hillary will be thrown under the bus again. She might actually get the nomination, but for some reason, I really think she'll be thrown under the bus because, well, there's a lot of people that are in her own party that are like, yeah, we don't want no more of you. Even though they might agree with her, they don't want her to have power. And I guess it'll be seen, but again, polls showed, though, that the only Republican that came close within 3 points of Hillary was Rand Paul, even though they put him at the bottom of the list when they showed it. At least Fox News did. But in the end of it all, I think you can go back to what Adam says, all of this is little compared to making the people aware. Because if there were people that weren't brainwashed, propagandized, that weren't unaware of what's really going on in the reality of things, it wouldn't be able to happen. And that's not something that's just unique to America. That's unique worldwide. And when people that have different ways of living, different cultures, different religions or non-religions, can learn to not let them being offended influence, how they treat each other, just to know that, you can't abridge the next person's right. You get to live your life as you choose, as long as you don't abridge other people's rights. And that's where all the infighting goes, and that's why these people are able to get away with what they get away with. And so we really have to address that at its core. And that's with waking people up, making them more aware. And, also, one of the things is prepping, making sure people are not only aware, but that they're going to be prepared if something was to happen and know how to stand by each other. When everybody brings something to the table, it's not just one person preparing and other people wanting to leech off of them, but when everybody prepares and brings something to the table, it's harder for people to come in and be tyrants and take over, whether it be your government or a invading army and government. It really relies on the people that disagree but can live with and defend each other. And that's when you start to see how diversity can be beautiful. And it's by knowing who you are and being comfortable around the other cultures and being able to interact with the other cultures in a peaceful manner. And back to being prepared before the end of this broadcast here, go to ucy.tv, click the UCY store tab, and check out the Amazon store that UCY has set up. Great prepping gear and radiation gear. Check them out. Thank you all for tuning in. I'll catch you this Friday. Stay tuned for the continual condition coming up next.